Your Majesty, Queen Rana, and actually fellow high-level panel member, Secretary General, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and I always like to end with the African all protocol observed. First of all, thank you, Richard and Amina, for this kind introduction. It's actually more than I could have hoped for. You obviously certainly inspire me, you both do, and I also know that you inspire many others with your unselfish generosity. I'm also truly honored and humbled to receive this Champion for Global Change Award that you give us today. But I'm glad to accept it not just for myself, but for the 175,000 people that I represent with my company Unilever, but also the numerous partners that we work with. Otherwise, it would not be possible. But I also think, most importantly, that this award should go for those that actually are in need, actually for the people for which we're trying to address the issues that Amina so eloquently talked about. More than ever, I believe that we need to work together in order to deliver a better world for all. It's only through aligning our efforts behind this common goal that a higher purpose, transformative change we often talk can really happen. As we mentioned in the high-level panel report that we issued to the Secretary General, it requires partnership based on solidarity, trust, and mutual respect. First, I obviously like to thank the Secretary General for his enormous leadership in rallying the Member States and others around us to this common goal, and actually your courage to include the business community in the high-level panel, which I know was not easy at the time that you decided to do that, and I'd like to thank you for that. I also like to thank Ted, actually, because you've done so much for the planet and its people. It's actually ironic, in my opinion, that you produced Captain Planet, because the simple fact is that you probably are the real superhero. You created the UN Foundation as a vital bridge to others. And in doing so, you laid the foundation for partnership to address the world's most pressing problems. You were a visionary before many others were. Also, hats off to Kathy, obviously, who's doing the marvelous work at the UN Foundation. And she obviously, as we all know, does it with energy and passion. Not only are you a dear friend, but you're also a great colleague. And it's a real pleasure working with you in so many things, like the B Team or the Post-2015 Agenda, the Climate Summit that we just finished, and numerous other projects, too many to mention. As many of you know, sustainability and development are issues very close to my heart and obviously closely linked. And I can talk about them for hours, but I see Kathy getting nervous, so I promise to keep it short. In fact, I only have 3 things to say. Think back, think beyond, and think big. I thought it perfectly summed up how far we have come on this journey together, where we need to be and how we're going to get there. Let's start with think back. Thinking back, we can all agree on the successes of the Millennium Development Goals. In fact, much has been achieved thanks to these goals and to the efforts of the international development community, not the least the UN. Extreme poverty has been halved. Over 2 billion people have gained access to things like clean drinking water. More people than ever have access to education. Child mortality has been reduced by half, and the list goes on. But anybody who has read Charles Dickens' book, The Tale of Two Cities, remembers the first 2 lines. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Despite the amazing achievements, we're still facing some serious challenges. Economic challenges being one of them. Very slow and patchy global growth. Social challenges as inequality and poverty, which are still very profound in many places, and unfortunately, again, on the rise. It's probably one of the reasons why countries like Liberia are still fighting this horrible Ebola virus. It would not have happened if the country would have been wealthier. It's a clear result of poverty more than anything else. We have the geopolitical challenges, which what seem to be increasingly regional and, yes, global conflicts. In fact, I just flew in last night from Russia and the Ukraine, where the situation indeed needs more than what we're currently giving it in attention. There are the environmental challenges, as we continue to use up the world's resources at an alarming rate. Now, in this context, it is evident that the path of business as usual will neither eradicate poverty nor provide environmental sustainability. We clearly need to put in place new guidelines, a strong moral framework, which reflects today's realities, and its flexibility is absolutely needed as it needs to adapt to the many changes that undoubtedly we will get between now and 2030. The SDGs, no matter how challenging and ambitious, are indeed that only framework that we can get right now and that we absolutely need. Not only think back, think also beyond. So thinking beyond, we know that next year member states will actually have an opportunity to challenge the status quo and change this business as usual. They have the opportunity to set the agenda, an agenda which captures the original promise of the MDGs and goes well beyond, to a world where indeed no one is left behind, which reflects all the dimensions of sustainability, the social, economic, as well as the environmental, which is universal, measurable, and action-oriented. Now, the stakes are huge, and so should be the member states' ambitions. The lowest common denominator will simply not suffice. And frankly, the people will not accept that, especially the young. This ambition needs to be underpinned by an action plan, one which is clear, which is workable, and which makes sense to all people, not just policymakers and experts. If we get this right, we will be able to reach beyond the walls of the UN. We must make this agenda an agenda for everyone, so that actually everyone can also play a part in its delivery. Take Unilever, a company I represent, 2 billion consumers we serve a day, hundreds of thousands of suppliers, and many millions actually of smallholder farmers that are linked into our supply chain. Harnessing this scale and reach, it's part of the thinking behind our Unilever Sustainable Living Plan and our commitment to decouple growth from environmental footprint and increasing our positive social impact. The Unilever Sustainable Living Plan reflects a fundamental change in the way business should be done, moving from too often a simple-minded focus of share value, and we're after all here in New York, to a focus of shared values. It just takes a D and an S more, but it makes a huge difference, I can tell you. Simply putting business to the service of society and not the other way around. And it's working. It's reducing costs, it's fueling innovation, it's building reputation, and yes, it's driving the growth of our brands. But whatever progress we make, there will always be a limit to what we can achieve alone. And this, in fact, brings me to my last point. Think big. If we are to realize our ambitions, we do need to think big. We need to create solutions at scale. We need to work in partnership and create the tipping points that will deliver this brighter future for all. Now, I believe that momentum is building. Much is already happening on the post-2015 and climate change negotiations. Last month, we were all in New York. I was actually pleased to see all the people joining together to think and act big. For example, we had the Business Manifesto, led again by the UN Foundation, a clear signal to governments that ambitious goals are key and that partnership with the private sector is a must. We had the climate action through the UN Global Compact, Caring for Climate Initiative, the World Bank Carbon Price Statement, and the We Mean Business Coalition. The New York Declaration on Forest, a global pledge to halve the losses of forest by 2020 and to halt the losses by 2030. And then, on Modi's Visit the Clean India campaign from Prime Minister Modi, it has sent a clear signal, at least in his country and beyond, that open defecation is simply not acceptable anymore. The 400,000 plus people who marched on the streets of New York were saying the same thing. So momentum is building, there is hope, but time is not on our side. I fully trust that member states will rise to the challenge, guided by the lights of the stars and not those of the passing ships, and agree on a set of robust and workable SDGs and a meaningful agreement in Paris, which we need as well next year. Now, I'm convinced that this generation, if it decides to do so, can indeed irreversibly eradicate poverty in a more sustainable and equitable way. The young are eager to be part of it, and so are the ones that are still left behind. You certainly can count on mine and Unilever's continued support to help make these goals a reality. As Gandhi said, that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. You're all amazing people. Keep up the good work, and thank you for your attention and for being here.